Over my years of playing fantasy football, there is one major edge that never gets talked about, and that edge is market overreaction, especially in the first few weeks of the season. The way fantasy football works is that we only have it for 4 months of the year. Everybody everywhere is excited year round. They're doing research, they're forming opinions, they're coming up with sleepers. Buffoons like myself are coming on here and telling you to draft 4th round rookie running backs that I've been studying since March. And then weeks 1, weeks 2, weeks 3 come around and we all change our opinions very quickly. And this phenomenon happens every single year. And you want to be able to pounce when some of your players are overvalued and are overperforming and you can sell high on them. You want to be able to pounce when some players are undervalued and you can buy low on them. So in today's video, we're going to break down a bunch of wide receivers, a bunch of running backs that could get out to hot starts to begin the year so that you are in a position of strength when you draft these players in your league. You can make some savvy moves to tier up from these players if you don't think they're going to continue their streaks. And you can go out and buy some of the underperforming players and sell high on some of your overperforming players as well. So let's start with the running back position, and we are going to be using a combination of factors to determine, who might get out to a hot start to try and predict this. Some of the things we're going to look at are historical trends, strength of schedule, some of their usage, some coaching tendencies, and everything in between. So we're going to start with Kenneth Walker. There's so much going in favor of Kenneth Walker to begin the season that I do think he's being undervalued right now in drafts. The first is continuity, right? He's in the same offense. Geno Smith is back at quarterback. The Seattle Seahawks wide receivers outside of Jackson Smith and Jigba all have chemistry with Geno Smith, and Walker himself is no longer a rookie running back, which is definitely a big deal. And I think people are underrating, the first to second year jump for running backs coming off of their rookie seasons. Historically, this is an article from Ryan Heath over at Fantasy Points that was excellent. It's probably the article of the entire summer. Historically, running backs break out at over a 30% rate in year 2, the second highest rate of breakout aside from rookie running backs. So the fact that we have Kenneth Walker jumping into a season where he's historically projected to have a good chance of breaking out, then we have the fact that his ADP right now is depressed because they drafted a second-round running back in Zach Charbonnet, a prospect, by the way, who I loved. But historically, we see rookie running backs not have massive roles right away, especially when you consider the fact that Zach Charbonnet is playing behind a good veteran running back and a good young running back. Usually we see second-round running backs get edged out by dusty old veterans that have no business starting over them, but not often do we see them, go to a team that already has an established young stud. So right now, you're getting a depressed price tag on Kenneth Walker because of the looming specter of Zach Charbonnet, when realistically, early on in the season, it's probably not going to affect them very much. In preseason games, we've seen Zach Charbonnet splitting time with DJ Dallas, even though Kenneth Walker hasn't been playing out there. The Seahawks face the Rams, the Lions, the Panthers, and the Giants to start the year, all of which are exploitable run defenses, and most of those teams are facing some challenges on their own side with new quarterbacks and, coaching concerns and stuff. Kenneth Walker is really tricky to evaluate properly because sometimes he goes in round 3 in home leagues, sometimes he goes in round 5 of underdog drafts, sometimes he's somewhere in the middle, and technically he is a running back dead zone archetype of running back. But for me, he's one of the few guys that I'm willing to venture into the dead zone for if he's going into the mid to late 4th round area. So that is the area of the draft that I'm willing to take the shot on him. Once we have Debo, Metcalf, Lamar, Joe Burrow, those type of guys off the board, I do think it becomes the range where I'm okay taking the risk on Kenneth Walker, especially knowing that he could get out to a hot start. You could potentially flip him for a ton more at the start of the year and maybe tier up to a better running back. Let's say if Breece Hall is not coming back up to speed quickly, or maybe Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor start off pretty slow, you might be able to go from Kenneth Walker right to those guys, and I do think he is worth the risk in your drafts in the mid to late 4th round, early 5th round area. Bijan Robinson is the next guy that I think can get out to a hot start. Normally, rookies do not start out fast, so this kind of does contradict what I just said with Zach Charbonnet, but here's the thing. Bijan was a top 10 pick. He was the 8th overall pick in the draft. He's receiving already the bell cow role in preseason games. As we saw on Friday when the Falcons played in their preseason games, in addition to looking great when he had the ball, he saw 73% of the snaps, 80% of the carries with the first team, 60% route participation, which is extremely, extremely high for a rookie running back, 11% target share, 17% targets per route run, and he was getting the work in long down and distance. We did not see, Cordero Patterson out there. This Falcons offense looked very sharp, and that's making me excited overall for this Falcons team, but especially for Bijan Robinson, who's going to make his money, on efficiency, on, touchdowns and that kind of thing, but he also does have a high receiving ceiling as well. Yeah, it's preseason. Yeah, Tyler Algier is going to be involved early on in the season, I would imagine as well. But when the usage box is checked this early on in the process, I'm very, very intrigued, especially knowing that Desmond Ridder looked decisive. Kyle Pitts was making one-handed catches. Drake London was mossing people. You can't help but get excited for this Falcons team. And knowing that they start their season with the Panthers, Packers, Lions, Jaguars, and Texans, all of whom, except for Jacksonville, were bottom 10 rush defenses in DVOA last year. And the Falcons, honestly, can probably win 3 or 4 of those games. Lions and Jaguars are their 2 toughest opponents, which I don't think they're all that different from. So Atlanta Falcons and Bijan Robinson could definitely get out to a hot start. And Bijan, of course, as you guys know, is my RB1. And this exercise further kind of reaffirmed why I think I'm willing to take him at 4th overall in my own home league draft coming up very soon. So the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. It's a veteran backfield, a young quarterback who's inexperienced. It sounds like a good recipe to me for a fast start from this run game because they faced the Bears, the Falcons, the Saints, the Lions, and the Raiders, all bottom of the league against the run last year. And like Kenneth Walker, Aaron Jones is not somebody that I would typically advocate for because he is technically a dead zone running back. But if it's late round 4, early round 5, I am cool with Aaron Jones with the intention of getting him off my team at some point. Because the key distinction between Kenneth Walker and Aaron Jones is that Kenneth Walker's 23 years old or 22 years old. Aaron Jones is almost 30. So I don't want to hold a running back who I expect to kind of wear down as the season goes along longer than, really 6 weeks to start the season. But because he has an established track record of RB1 production, because, like I said, they could get out to a hot start in this backfield, I am okay with Aaron Jones. Again, once those Debo, DK Metcalf type of wide receivers are off the board, if you're in need of running backs in the late 4th, early 5th round, I do think Aaron Jones is a reasonable projection there. Then we get into Jonathan Taylor, who will be the last running back that I talk about here, and then we'll get into some wide receivers. JT is a really difficult projection right now because there's so much uncertainty surrounding his situation. He's literally not even with his team right now, but my gut tells me, and I've read some articles that kind of suggest the same thing, that all of this uncertainty is going to clear up in the next week, next 2 weeks or so. Everything from the holdout to the ankle to the trade request, I do think it's all not going to matter once we get into the season. If he plays, he could really smash early on in the year because he still is the same guy that finishes the RB1 just 2 years ago. We could all forget really fast that Jonathan Taylor had a lot of uncertainty this offseason. His schedule is very, very good starting the season, and even though he has a rookie quarterback, and that definitely comes with some concerns, Anthony Richardson might be more inclined to run the ball very often early on in his NFL career, and that's going to be good for Jonathan Taylor, because if the quarterback is a rushing threat, which of course he is, then it could open up some rushing lanes for JT, and especially knowing that he's going to have some fresh legs coming off of, what was a season that he didn't get a lot of touches last year. I really do think Jonathan Taylor is a gamble that I am willing to make, and on Underdog Fantasy drafts, right now I'm in like 50 slow drafts to close out my Best Ball Mania entries. I've been taking a lot of Jonathan Taylor at the late 2nd round, early 3rd round area. And speaking of Underdog Fantasy, if you guys want your share of $15 million in total prizes, $3 million goes to first place in Best Ball Mania 4. Check them out. And of course, use code FSE for 100% back up to $100. It's sharp draft rooms. It's the best preparation that you guys can get for your home league drafts if you have them coming up. And you need our draft guide as well to dominate your friends and family. And you can get it for free with a sign up and deposit using code FSE. You just deposit $10 and you'll get our draft guide for free within 24 hours, as well as our weekly rankings for free within 24 hours to help you out throughout this season. If you can't play on Underdog in where you live, or if you already have an account, of course, our draft guide is available on Flock Fantasy as well. And of course, use code FSE for 30% off over there. Link will be down below in the description. So, wide receiver position, and then we will wrap this thing up. The Buccaneers wide receivers, you guys can see the schedules for all of the teams that I'm going to talk about here at the wide receiver position. The Buccaneers wide receivers are the first that we're going to talk about because the Vikings, Bears, Eagles, and Saints plus a bye is how Tampa Bay will start off their season. There's quarterback turmoil with Baker Mayfield probably being the starter going into the year, and that makes things a little bit sketchy, but all 4 of those offenses that I just mentioned can score against the Bucs, and the Vikings, Bears, and Saints specifically are quite soft against wide receivers. We view, or at least I view, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans as probably one of the best wide receiver duos in the league, a top 5 wide receiver duo. I do think that we could see a similar overreaction or market reaction that if Godwin and Evans are just fine, that people are not really that concerned with them, and you could probably tier up and sell high on those guys, especially after weeks 1 and 2 when they play against the Vikings and Bears, who are probably two of the worst pass defenses in the entire NFL. And if Baker Mayfield looks some semblance of a decent quarterback, and Chris Godwin's catching touchdowns and a lot of passes, Mike Evans has a big play or two, you could probably sell high on those guys. So definitely keep that in mind when you see Chris Godwin fall into the 5th, 6th round, or Mike Evans fall into the 6th, 7th round. Those guys could really return on investment because they have big names. They have a lot of proven production in the past, and if people see it yet again, they're just going to assume it's going to be business as usual. I have concerns for those guys long term, but short term, in the beginning of the season, they should get out to a hot start. The Seattle wide receivers, similar to the Bucs wide receivers, I have not that much concern for the Seattle wide receivers going into the season, especially because JSN is a rookie. And JSN in traditional home leagues, unless he's there in the 7th, 8th round, I'm probably not drafting a ton of him because I do think Metcalf and Lockett, as the veterans, will probably be the established targets at the beginning of the year. They have continuity with Geno Smith. It's an easy schedule, as I mentioned, for Kenneth Walker. That could make Metcalf and Lockett two guys that you draft, absorb that production early on in the season, and then try to tier up away from those guys before Jackson Smith and Jigba becomes a major factor, which will probably happen as the season goes along. I don't think JSN will come out guns a-blazing and be the number one for this team. I would be very shocked if that happened. Currently, right now, you can get Metcalf at the 3-4 turn. You can get Tyler Lockett in round 5, round 6 area. And right now, I'm honestly okay with both of those price tags, knowing that I could potentially tier up to a better option, a guy with more longevity, if these guys get out to a hot start early on in the season, which I expect to happen because they do have a pretty easy schedule, as I mentioned, for Walker. So Eagles wide receivers, back to the continuity theme. We had a near MVP winning quarterback in Jalen Hurts last year. And when we think of the recent quarterbacks who have made these big leaps as passers and their teams are now, rallied behind them. We go back to 2020 when Josh Allen did it. He only threw 596 pass attempts, which was about middle of the road in terms of the NFL. The next year in 2021, he was a top 5 passer in overall attempts with 655. Joe Burrow in 2021, coming off the ACL tear, the Bengals ran the ball a lot more than they did last year, 610 attempts. Jalen Hurts, again, was not a proven commodity coming into the season, so 536 pass attempts was something that we saw from him. Could they really give him the keys to this offense and throw the ball more? I absolutely think that's possible, and if that happens, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are going to be guys that potentially get out to big starts. Philly was also a top 10 team last year in neutral pass rate in the first half of games, but they just slaughtered so many teams early on that they were mainly running the clock. They were the second most run-heavy team in the NFL in the second half of football games. The Patriots, Vikings, Buccaneers, Commanders, and Rams are their first 5 games. I think that the Eagles can really dominate the time of possession against those teams, and also a lot of those defenses were very susceptible to big plays last year, and of course that's where A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are going to make their money. So the last wide receiver core that we're going to talk about as a potential team that could get out to a hot start is the Los Angeles Chargers wide receivers. Similar situation to the Seattle Seahawks guys. You have a rookie wide receiver coming in with Quentin Johnston. He's dragging some of the ADPs down. People are a little bit more concerned with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams than they have been in recent years. Those guys are both older wide receivers, so if they're going to perform, we usually expect it to be coming early on in the year. They have continuity, they have chemistry with Justin Herbert, and their new offense, Kellen Moore, is expected to open this thing up and throw the ball a lot. It could be very much bombs away quickly, and that could be a huge market shift in the minds of fantasy players because the Chargers versus the Dolphins, the Titans, the Vikings, and the Raiders is what they have in their first 5 games with a bye in week 5. I am smelling some high over-unders, especially with that Dolphins and Vikings game in week 1 to 3 specifically. In weeks 1 and 3 specifically, and some exploitable pass defenses. All 4 of those teams that I just mentioned, the Dolphins were 25th against the pass in DVOA last year. The Titans were 28th. The Vikings were 26th, and the Raiders were 31st. So if the Chargers get out to a hot start, there's a good chance you're going to be able to swap Keenan Allen for maybe a young wide receiver that's underperforming. Maybe Garrett Wilson gets out to a slow start. Maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown gets out to a slower start. Because Keenan Allen has name cachet, he's a guy that's produced in the past. Some people might be willing to overpay for him. And same goes for Mike Williams. There could be a lot of big plays in that offense early on in the season, and Mike Williams could be a guy that you sell high on as well. So this video is very strategic in nature, right? We want to make sure that when we draft, we're drafting for the beginning of the season, because myself, I don't know about you guys, I'm a trade addict. I like to, take advantage when my players are overvalued and sell high on them. I like to take advantage when players on my opponent's teams are undervalued and buy low on them. So by drafting a team that's good for the beginning of the season, that can help you win fantasy matchups from weeks 1 to 5, it gives you a lot of buying power in season to be able to make trades. And of course, every Wednesday on this channel, we're going to talk about the week's trade targets, and I will break down exactly who I'm buying, who I'm selling, so you make sure to tune into that. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe. Like I said, if you have a draft coming up, you could really use our draft guide, and it is an easy acquisition. All you have to do, go down to the pinned comment, click the link to play Underdog Fantasy, deposit using $10. With promo code FSE, you'll have $20 on the site to play with. You can do some practice drafts to get yourself prepared for your home league. And as a thank you for using our promo code, you will get our draft guide for free within 24 hours, as well as our weekly rankings for the start-sit decisions that you have to make throughout this season. So if that interests you, link down below in the pinned comment. If you can't play Underdog, or if you already have an account, it is available on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for 30% off, as well as a free Zoom consultation if you sign up annually, and a bunch of other benefits. You get the bonus content of Mason over at Fantasy Flock, the bonus content of the Fantasy Land and Dynasty Land guys, the Dynasty Domain guys, the Fantasy Endgame guys. We have teamed up to bring you guys an awesome product. So if you guys are just coming back to the scene, last year, we were talking about our Patreon. Basically, you're getting 5 channels Patreons on one site for one price. So make sure to use the promo code FSE over there. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.